Let's go!
Imagine walking into Sega HQ in 1993 and telling them they just turned down the exact silicon hardware that would shape the future of 3D gaming forever.
Oof. Talk about $1 billion blunder, because while Sega passed, Nintendo pounced.
Yeah, today we're taking you back to the absolute Wild West of the 1990s. We're diving into the chaotic inception, the grueling development, and the massive legacy of a machine that had to literally teach the world how to move in 3 dimensions.
We're talking makeshift engineering teams working in total secrecy, trying to figure out how a human hand is supposed to control a 3D camera.
We've got Frankenstein-style prototype SNES controllers, jerry-rigged to play just one tech demo.
And a high-stakes Hollywood tech partnership that pushed Silicon Valley and Kyoto to their absolute limits.
So, blow the dust out of your cartridges, ignore the delayed launch dates, and grab those weirdly shaped three-pronged controllers.
Because today, we are diving deep into the broken promises, the frantic deadlines, and the pure engineering madness that birthed the Nintendo 64.
Gaming flair, pixel dreams and worlds to share, joystick tales and button cues. Welcome to Gaming Views.
Welcome to Gaming Views. I'm Dan H, and joining me, as always, is a man who, much like the Nintendo 64 controller, requires at least 3 hands to fully operate. He's the only guy I know who still blows into his tech devices when they freeze up, and a man whose joystick is permanently drifting to the left. It's my very good friend, Mr. Dan P. How you doing, mate?
I'm not going to say how much of that intro you got scarily correct, so we'll just leave it on. I want to say I'm all right, Dan, for 2 things. One, I'm hot. We're recording this on quite a hot evening. And 2, it's taken us 23 minutes to start because of an update, isn't it? So,
yeah, thanks podcast hosting software.
Yeah.
Mother beep.
23 minutes.
That's just ridiculous, man. It's just, yeah. And the heat isn't helping. My patience is incredibly low. Because of the warm weather. I'm not going to complain about it because we don't get it that often.
We will, and we do.
Yeah, fair. Right. I am going to look. Let's go off on a rant about it, right? What the fuck happened? I was literally sitting there this morning going, it's a couple of days of heat. I can cope with that. And then I looked at the weather and suddenly a weather warning popped up and went, no, it's all week. 30 degrees all next week. Don't worry about it.
I don't know why, but I'm putting it down to a sign that the steam machine is going to be announced. Steam heat.
Steam.
There we go.
Horseman of the Apocalypse.
Steam machine release date tomorrow.
Ramageddon.
Ramageddon.
Is it tomorrow? No, it's supposed to be 23rd, I think, isn't it? Is it 23rd? I think they're saying it's...
When this episode goes out, it's going to be the 22nd, so it would be tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow it'll be...
No, it's not. Do you know what?
Not, you're lying.
Roll, keep going.
Ignore everything Dan P talks about. Last week, they announced the prices and the release date for the Steam machine. Is that people,
right? We're recording. Some tech company announced something last week and they're going to release something in the future. We're recording
redundancy, Dan.
We're recording out of our normal thing because I'm going away again for a couple of days, but not on a jolly. This is a work thing, and it's confused me. Dan, it's your episode. Take control.
Good. Right.
Wrestle control.
Nonsense about disappearing.
Wrestle control away from me. Do it.
God, I'm going to. Right. What have you been playing, Dan?
Let's back to me. It's back to
me. Back to you anyway.
Right. What have I been playing? So I've completed now Ghost of Tsushima. Really, really enjoyed it. I think in the last episode, I said, that it took me sort of 17 odd hours just to do the first act. So I did what I've done on a couple of games where it felt like there was a lot to do. I actually just focused on the main quest.
Okay.
And I think that was the right thing to do for this game because I really enjoyed the story. And I just feel that diluting it with the side quests was literally diluting it. I really enjoyed the story. Act 2 had a massive kind of turning point in it. The end of the game was great. And yeah, they just, all I'm going to say is just a great game. They keep layering mechanics on different sort of gameplay elements. It did get it felt like a little bit grindy towards the end in the sense of, we're just defend this or defeat the waves of enemies. But yeah, the ending I thought was a really good ending, and yeah, really great game. I'm glad I got the opportunity to play it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I've said it before, I really enjoyed Ghost of Tsushima. I, again, haven't finished it. I will go back and play it. Although I'm kind of thinking, do I really want to? Because will it spoil Ghost of Yotai? Because the waves of enemies thing and the little bit never ever happened once in Yotai. It was all very fluid in the story. There was never anything like that thrown at you. You know, the final act is all very bombastic and kind of, you know what you get into. Yeah, so, and I'm kind of worried now that if I go back to it, I'm just going to be like, oh, it's not as good.
Yeah.
Which I don't want. But yeah, great game.
Yeah. No, so completed that. So in terms of my main game, I've now moved on to, I only really briefly started it last night, but Spider-Man 2. So playing that on the improvised, as I call it, Steam machine. Literally, you've just done the opening, but it gets off to such an amazing start. The battle against Sandman,
amazing.
It's just incredible. I meant that. It's just an incredible opening, and you know this. I think that is often what games can do really well when they really throw you into something. You know, when it gets off to that sort of fantastic start. So yeah, I'm only about half an hour in, so it's still taking you through the ropes. So I've got to do some photo missions for, that Robbie, is it Robbie? I want to say Robbie Elliott, but he was a footballer.
Robbie Robertson.
That's it. Yeah, of course. It's Spider-Man, so it's got to be alliteration, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it looks great, and obviously in this one you get to switch between the two, so Peter Parker and Miles Morales. So, look, it's more Spider-Man, right? I enjoyed the first one. I enjoyed Miles Morales. So, I'm hoping for more of the same from this.
Yeah, and I think you'll get it. Like I said to you earlier, I think I enjoyed the original story more than the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just because of some of the places the second one goes, it's a bit like, and there were bits I wasn't massively fond of in the first one, and it's got nothing to do with taking control of a woman. I just want to be really clear on that. But the bits where you kind of jumped into MJ it was just a bit like, I just want to be Spider-Man. Do you know what I mean? I mean, give her a Spider-Man costume, I'd have been happy. But she's just creeping around trying not to avoid getting
stealth, wasn't it? Those were the stealth sections.
Yeah, they just felt a bit shoved in, and Spider-Man 2 does something very similar at parts. So, but again, I have downloaded it onto the PS5 Pro to have another go at it because I really did really enjoy it. And to be honest, I've forgotten it like most of the games because age. But yeah, I think you'll love it. I think you'll really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, looking forward to really getting stuck into that. And then kind of as a side game, I've not played it as much at the moment the last couple of nights because I've really wanted to complete Ghost and then start Spider-Man. But playing this on the Xbox through Game Pass, it's Call of the Elder Gods, so the follow-up to Call of the Sea. Did you play the original?
No, I didn't. And what I'd read, the only thing I'd really read about the sequel is that it just changed the game completely almost. So so I've got no point of reference though. So I didn't read the whole thing. I just went, why have they done that? But then kind of moved on.
Yeah, I've not played I've played the original, but I can't remember it too well. But this one, again, it's very colourful in style. It's the first couple of hours, again, it's a lot of puzzles, but it's not like, like I was talking about the Seventh Guest remake where it's you go into a room and it's just puzzle, puzzle, puzzle. There's a story there. You're walking around first person. You'll just come across these puzzles that you need to solve. Now, I won't spoil anything what I know about the story at the moment, but there's a narrator as well, and some of the things they say are quite funny based on what's happening on screen. And it does a clever thing where this is the sort of thing I like when games do. Like you're asked a question and you've got like yes or no. So I went to do yes, but the narrator makes you say no, or the game forces you to say something else. So yeah, at the moment it's good. The puzzles I've come across at the moment are quite straightforward, except when I'm being a complete idiot. I think I said to you there was one where you've got to unlock a gate in the garden of this premises you're on, and you see this gate. It's got a massive lock with these 5 bars that go across. You've got to adjust things around the garden to unlock each bar. But I didn't see which way the bars were going, so I thought they had to go one way. So I thought, oh, yep, there we go, do that one. It's done. I thought I'd got all 5, went to open the gate, and I'd actually been locking it rather than unlocking it. I'd pretty much accidentally stumbled. I think I must have unlocked it first time when I was doing this thing, but not realised it. And so I then had to go around and do the whole puzzle again. So, but that's a me thing. That's not a game thing. But yeah, so that's kind of going to be my side game.
What is it? Is it like a point and click adventure type styley thing, or
it's sort of so it's first person, and you're going around and you can pick up things. There's information as you go along. There's interactive things, and it's very simple puzzles. So it's kind of I would probably describe it as like an old school 3D an old school point and click vibe, but in a 3D first person game.
Okay,
it's got that vibe. So,
you played the original, did you?
I did, but you know what? I don't remember it too much because I remember
it doesn't matter if they changed it because you didn't remember anyway.
but it's got a question at the start it asks you whether you've played the original. So I said no on that because I'm guessing there are definite callbacks to the original. So I think by clicking no, I'm hoping it's expanding on those. So yeah, that's what I'm playing. And I'll tell you what, I've got because I've got a Philips TV, it's the Ambilight, I think it's called.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So,
because this is, like I said, and it really works really well with Ghost of Tsushima as well. It's, because it's such a bright, colourful game on screen. And then because it then just sort of extends out onto the wall, it's another great game to kind of have that on.
Yeah. It's exactly why I bought my Govee light strip for the TV T3 Pro thing. It's brilliant. I love that. You wouldn't think a bit of a glow around the back of your TV does much,
honestly,
but it really does.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, we've been watching Cape Fear on Apple, the new telling of the story, and that's all splashed with quite vivid colours in certain points, and they extending out the side of the TV looks amazing. Anyway, this isn't Cape Fear view.
Yeah. So what have you been playing?
I'm in a weird place for games right now. I haven't played a huge amount this week, mainly because of time. And I'm kind of struggling. We've talked before about you have this kind of, not a lull, but you kind of get through a couple of great games and you're like, I don't know what to play. So, I, having finished Ghost of Yotai and a couple of other games, I'm now in like, I went through Control again. So I've started, I started playing Astrobot. I mentioned that. So I've been playing some more of that. And again, it's brilliant. It's just a really good, clever game. There's lots of, I think the level I'm on now, I've just started the mechanics, like a time slowdown. You can stop time and then speed up time. And it just the level they've built around it is brilliant. And it's just it's all this mad casino level. And it's just so well done. And it's starting to get more, the puzzles are starting to build and become more complex in terms of where things are and how you work things out. Which I loved. There's just an example in this level, you get to the front of it and there's like 3 dolphins jumping out of a pool.
Okay.
And it just looks like the scenery. But then you kind of go, if I stop time, I could probably jump up them and then over to a thing. And so, it's not part of the level, but there's a special to collect like up that, above it. So I was like, you work that out. You go, I'm quite clever, aren't I? You're not, but so yeah, I just think it's a wonderful game. I think it's so charming and I think it's done so well. And, like I said, it's a shame it's all very PlayStation-y, but it is, there's a charm to that as well. So yeah, loving Astrobot. I still think you should just borrow my old PlayStation player, to be honest, mate, because it's so good. Good.
I feel like I have to now.
I think you have to. Then I put in the notes that I, on the premise that I would have, but didn't, play Dave the Diver in the Jungle. So I bought Dave the Diver in the Jungle, the DLC for Dave the Diver. I fell in love with Dave the Diver and played it religiously for ages. Very last, like I wasn't up to date with everyone else playing it. I fell into it late, and I downloaded it. I went to to play it, and it went, you got to finish the main story first. And I was like, oh fuck! Like I haven't finished the main story, so I logged in and started playing again. So I ended up playing a bit of Dave the Diver. But I started playing it. I was like, I wonder how far off I am of the end. And I'm very, very close. But I got to this bit, and people who've played it will know it, where this little sea drone comes down and goes, I've got to cut through this stuff and it's going to take 2 in-game days. And I was like, oh, now I've got to go and run a sushi bar. I just want to finish the game so I can start doing the new stuff. So,
sorry, do you think it's a bit naughty where they lock you out of a DLC unless you finish? There's got to be a specific reason.
I think so when you first go in, it basically says you have to finish the main thing. But I was reading an article that's saying there is a way to kind of go ignore that and go, no, I just want to play it. So you can force it, but because it says to you, you really should. I'm thinking, is there something that happens that I don't really want to miss out on that then alludes to something in the second game?
A big spoiler in the DLC or something.
So I just thought, I'm so close in, I might as well finish it. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, but you're going to get distracted by the next game that it throws at you within there, and that's it.
Yeah. It became a twin stick puzzle game. In the bit I was in, you control 2 characters and you have to control them both to do things at once, which is quite clever. It still keeps throwing new things at you. I do love that game. So I will hopefully next time come back and say, yes, I've started Dave Diver in the Jungle. And then the other game I picked up, launched on the same day, which is yesterday, and I've only put maybe 2 or 3 hours in, is Elliot the Millennial Tales. So Elliot the Millennial Tales is a Square Enix 2.5 HD RPG, so very retro style. And again, there'll be videos up and people will be able to see it. Launched on Thursday. It's very, very charming. It is, I think the safest way to explain it is it's Square Enix's take on Zelda. So you play an adventurer with a sword who runs around, and you've got a fairy companion, and you're very, very nattily dressed. And, you're very dapper. You've got a hat and it's all done in a very Square Enix way, like how they do the old school Final Fantasy. And, basically they're kind of 2.5D sprites. And then you've got, when they talk, the character picture of them all beautifully drawn comes up in that kind of Japanese art style, and they've done that for each of the characters in there. The environments are lovely. The way the thing is genuinely, if you'd taken something like Secret of Mana or one of those games from, back in the day, and I just added a shitload of polish to it and made it really, really stunning. Like they used to do all the, on the SNES, they throw in as much mode 7 as possible to make it look cool. If you put that in nowadays tech, that's what it does a lot of. And it looks stunning. It's a genuinely lovely game. It's got the dungeons and puzzles, and it's got some time traveling mechanics in there, which are really, really cool. I've only just picked up my fairy companion, which I think is, like I said, you're about 2 or 3 hours in. But I'm really enjoying it so far. And I do love that kind of thing. So I'm hoping it hasn't super grabbed me is the only downside, but I think that's because it's been trying to teach you all of the mechanics. And you get your companion, and I've just found and finished the first mini dungeon it's not even a dungeon. It's like a training temple to get her first power. So she can light things on fire, which will open up a load of stuff because, you're walking past things and it will say, I wish I could light that up. I wonder what happens if we set that on fire. Yeah. So, that's the other downside of it. One, I wish the fairy would shut the fuck up. It talks constantly and it's bordering on that. Can you give me a minute to work the puzzle out before you tell me what the solution is? Do you know what I mean? And I'm just like, oh my God, and the other thing is when it wants you, for story reasons, which I think this is the last bit of forcing you, for story purposes, you'll start walking towards somewhere and then the fairy, or prior to that, it was a princess talking to you, will go, oh no, I think we've got something else to do before you go there. And it'll make you turn around and you're like, I want to go there. I want to go do that. Let me go do that. And no, you can't. It literally forces you to turn around. You're like, oh, fuck off. Yeah. So I think because we're so used to games being open and expansive, when it limits you and stops you, you're like,
But it is weird though how they do it, because Tsushima did that. It would just say return to the tail area if you're in a mission. But you're right. It's but the weird thing about this was today I was actually looking at that game, because I saw it on my list and I was looking at it, and then you messaged me, said I've just bought was it Elliot the Millennial Tales, and I thought, but I was literally just looking at that. So Yeah.
Millennium Tales. Millennial Tales is a really Millennial Tales, very different one.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of kids wandering around moping with their hands in their pockets. That's a different. But it is great. I think I think you'd really enjoy it if you like a good solid JRPG with kind of I would say live action combat, but not turn based. Do you know? I can't remember what the word for it is. Dan, it's too hot. But that great game. So I'm going to carry on playing that. I think I did start Meaning the Hollower. It was very hard. I went off Meaning the Hollower very quickly, but I still paid my money to the devs, so good on them. Yeah. So I think this one is a little bit more forgiving for me. So yeah, we'll play that.
Nice.
Alrighty. Did you want to do comment corner? Comment corner.
Yeah, we've got a couple. We only got a couple because at the moment, like I said, we're recording this episode earlier than we normally do. So this is on our Sonic episode because the next episode that's coming out as we're recording, so last week's episode would be the football one. And the World Cup, Dan, those results that happened this week, on those teams. What a shocker,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Football.
And that team that did really well that nobody was expecting, that team, they did, because we're recording in advance. Yeah. Right. Really moving on before we upset people. So we had a couple of comments on the episode itself, and it was mostly from Pete there. So hi, Pete. So Pete over on YouTube. So firstly said, welcome to the Pro Club, Dan H. And I think he means obviously the PlayStation Pro as opposed to...
It's a different club, that other one, and my wife would shoot me if I got involved in that one.
But yeah, and then he said, because I think we were talking about a little bit, and in the last episode, and I think for weeks to come about the whole exclusive thing. He said, as an OG Xbox guy, and yet he was, and a huge Halo fanboy, which I can definitely confirm. He said, come enjoy a scotch out of his Master Chief decanter. Xbox have been all over the place for the last 5 to 10 years. Their messaging is so unclear and they change it on a yearly basis. Unless you're relying on Xbox for YouTube or something, in my opinion, you'd be mad to invest in their next console. I've also owned every Xbox, had to for Halo, so I'm praying they keep Halo on PlayStation.
Yeah, because he's PlayStation now, isn't he?
Yeah, he's PlayStation now. And he's right. I mean, the thing is, can't deny they have been all over the place. I mean...
We'll get to them.
Yeah.
We'll get to them today. Yeah. I think the weird thing, what is it about being a fan about something that means you then own a decanter of it? I love Star Wars. I have a Stormtrooper decanter as well. And I'm like, why have I got... And I can guarantee Pete didn't buy that himself. Someone bought that for him. Because it's not... As a fan, you don't go, I'm going to buy a decanter.
Well, what I will say, and I think I'm okay. Say, Pete, I'm okay? Yeah, I'm sure I am. I can hear.
Yeah, he said yeah.
He's very much... He does like his whiskey as well, so he might have done.
He's very much an alcoholic. That's my dad.
No. I didn't say that. Moving swiftly on. On our the video where we revealed that Sonic was almost called Mr. Needle Mouse.
Mr. Needle Mouse, yeah.
We had a couple of things. So apparently you're using young hip lingo.
Didn't understand this comment at all, Dan, and I'm glad you went and found out because I didn't know what they meant.
So Calm Bishop said the most unintentional correct usage of the roadman colloquialism still ever. So yeah, there you go. Look at you.
I said the word still. I didn't know where I said it, or I didn't even watch the video back to understand it. Thanks, though.
Yeah.
I'm a roadman.
Thanks, I think you should say. We don't know.
Thanks, still.
Hold on. I was going to say, yeah, thanks, still. And then we had Radical H13 say on the same video, Sonic Frontiers, and then puts a red X, Mr. Needle Mouse Frontiers, green tick.
Yeah. I think it's a much better name, to be honest.
Yeah.
Mr. Needle Mouse. Because you don't need the hedgehog after it.
No, exactly. Mr. Needle Mouse.
Sonic Mr. Needle Mouse.
Well, Mr. Needle Mouse also sounds so formal, doesn't it, as well? Hello, Mr. Needle Mouse.
Oh, hi, Sonic. You can call me Mr. Needle Mouse. Yeah.
And I think we had a comment over on TikTok. This was on the clip talking about how Sonic was almost in a rock band at the start. And this is Aaron Douglas said, I watched Sonic Underground. I've always known Sonic had that in him. So, yeah.
I had to look up what Sonic Underground was.
Yeah, so did I. Because I think we referenced the comic, or I referenced the comic towards the end, but Yeah, I don't think I named the comic, but yeah.
I don't remember. And there was so much content in there and so much of me just laughing for minutes on end. I don't remember.
Yeah, so
it's good.
Yeah, so those are the comments. So yeah, please do leave us comments and questions or anything basically on our clips.
Yeah, and while you're there, please don't forget to subscribe, like the episode. We love having you on board, and it means the world to us to do so. Right, Dan, let's get into some news. We've got quite a bit of churn. I'm going to start with some bad news. I'm going to lump them together because fucking the last few weeks sucked, to be quite honest, in the video gaming world. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about a game I'd been playing. You can still pick it up on Game Pass. Really, really good. A game called Lunar Abyss. So I think I said at the time it was a bit Metroid, a bit Returnal, a bit Metroidvania, a bit Doom, a bit H.R. Geiger. Great game. Really, really good. And as Kotaku say here, it punches above its weight. Well, unfortunately, got great reviews and really positive player ratings, but the studio behind it are preparing to close its doors after less than a month. And they said this is Quali Labs, and the CEO, Holly Emery, said, "We're enamoured by the love and support we've received both via our industry and critically by journalists and media. Whilst we faced many challenges along the way, it has been the highlight of our careers, and we're incredibly proud that it has finally seen the light of day. Thank you to everyone who believed in us." Yeah, so unfortunately, the entire team was made redundant, but said it was a decision completely out of their control. Real shame. It's really hard in our hobby and the thing that we love when we see these really talented studios, who make games and stuff they haven't done before. And you see, games of this caliber coming out. This thing was over 80% on Metacritic, and I think Polygon called it one of the best shooters of 26, which is actually the reason I picked it up. And Steam, it's got 86% rating in terms of positive. So yeah, I just think it's a real shame. The industry's going through a really tough time at the moment. Yeah, I know you haven't played it, but
No, I've downloaded it because it was on my list. And I think I'll have more to say on this on your next story. But it is a shame. And look, it's one thing if a game, look, and I'm not necessarily saying it's right, but if a game's comes out and it isn't a great game and it's really poorly reviewed, etc. It's one thing you can almost see that, but when a game, like I said, has come out and has got good reviews and is loved, it's a shame. When it's even more of a shame, I think, when that studio goes. It's I think I'll be echoing it in your next bit, but it's like, again, I will say, as gamers, we just want to see studios thriving and making games, right? And it's tough when you see this. And like you said, the thing is, it feels like we've said something about this for like the last 5 or 6 weeks. That's the depressing thing. Yeah.
Totally. And particularly with, and we'll get on to Microsoft in a sec, but particularly with them now saying, well, actually we want to focus on the big things that we've got. We want to focus on building a new Elder Scrolls. We want to focus on Halo. We want to focus on, which is great, right? Because I love those franchises and they're really good when they come out. But I also love these studios that are given an opportunity to build something great. Like I said, with something like Lunar Abyss. But then you worry that, they clearly were worried about the audience they might get and the scale of what they might do. So they did a Game Pass deal. They worked with Microsoft to launch on Game Pass. I don't know whether it was exclusive or not, but you just worry that then gets drowned out by everything else on there. And therefore it doesn't actually get the presence that it needs to succeed. It's a busy old market out there, but you've got to take a punt and go, well, I'm going to throw it on there to see what happens. And we've got a bit of a better news story coming up around a Steam game that launched, which had the opposite impact. So let's move on swiftly to another really shitty announcement, which is from Xbox. Most recently, you may have heard about this. So yeah, very shortly after their quite successful, I felt, showcase, in which one of the games that really stood out there was Senua, which is the new game from Ninja Theory, the follow-up to Hellblade 1 and 2. They announced that not only were they shutting down Compulsion Games, which we spoke about last week, but also potentially, or certainly looking at shutting down Double Fine and Ninja Theory, the creators of Senua. This blows my mind in some respects. I mean, Double Fine have always been a studio that whoever's owned them, whether they've been self-owned or owned by Microsoft, they've kind of just been left to do their own thing because, they're kind of mad scientists and they come up with some genius stuff. Psychonauts 2 was phenomenal, follow-up to one of my favorite ever games, Psychonauts. Keeper was all right. It was mad, but it was brilliant at the same time. And, it wasn't everyone's cup of tea because it was very ethereal and very kind of floaty. And it wasn't what everyone wanted. It was no killing things and shooting things in it, but it was a beautiful game all about the journey of movement. And I really, really enjoyed that game. And then Kiln. So, but it's still a shame that a company like that, and I think the only way in which Double Fine responded, which is the way I would expect them to, is they just tweeted out an emoji, right? Which is a sad face about it. Look, so, and whether they are able to go self-funded, whether they're able to find someone to buy them, I don't know. Ninja Theory was a shocker, I think, for a lot of people, particularly because during the showcase, one of the best received games I felt was Senua.
It was one of my highlights. So, it was one of my games. Yeah.
Right. It looked absolutely brilliant. And look, Ninja Theory, again, a bit like Double Fine. They've always been left to cook and do their own thing. And it's always very much been, it's always been Hellblade. They've got one of the best motion capture studios in the UK, which is clear when you see those games in motion. But to announce a game as coming out and launching, and then immediately after, within 48 hours go, we're shutting them down. So what does that mean?
Well,
is that game happening?
The Twitter theory, if we want to obviously put any credence in there, is saying that, or what I've seen, the theory is that they were using that almost as a sales pitch to say,
right, that makes sense.
But so I think the game is coming, but I think it's almost like, they're using it as a touting them out to say, look, come buy them because, they've got this great game that they're about to release kind of thing.
It's mad, isn't it? I think the state of affairs at Xbox at the moment is just a really sad, weird thing that's going on. And look, you can point fingers and you can say, oh yeah, but it was, it was the guys before us. It was all their fault. But from where I'm sitting, you've spent the best part of $69 billion on some of the biggest names in the industry in one lump sum. The Activision Blizzard deal primarily, and King and everything else they got with it. And all you've got to show for it really is a year-on-year Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's not a great deal other than that's kind of come out of this for them. All right. You kind of go, what? Where have you gone wrong, man? What have you've done? You fucked up somewhere big time, because that wasn't the only thing they did. They then went and bought, within that 2-year period, they went and bought Compulsion. They went and bought Double Fine. They went and bought Ninja Theory within a 2-year period. And now all of a sudden it's like, we'll get shot at them. But you might see them crumble and we won't see them ever again.
This is it. And I think I said in last week's episode, look, businesses, especially when there's either a takeover or there's a change at the top, will make decisions, and they'll often be difficult ones. And look, and as Pete's message said as well, Microsoft have been all over the place the last few years. So there was always going to be some tough decisions. But like you said, these are studios that are known for putting out good games. Now, some people are saying, Compulsion they spent however many millions it was and only put one game out that kind of underperformed. Ninja Theory, again, spend millions and they'll release a game every 5 years or whatever. But, that's not a problem when, say, Naughty Dog or whatever are releasing a game every 5 years. And they release great games, but what I'm trying to say is, if you're having an argument, putting an argument forward, it's got to be applicable to everything. Now, what I will say about this, and it is crazy, and these are studios that would produce great games for Xbox if they are going to be exclusive. Double Fine, I thought would be the one that would go, not because they're not good, but they're kind of making, like you said, those really niche, like almost like indie games. And I don't think maybe Xbox want that anymore. That's almost like a Nintendo.
They're super exploratory in their work. Yeah. You're totally right. It is very avant-garde and out there. Their stuff, whatever they produce. I mean, Kiln, just by looking at it, you're like, fucking who had pottery battle royale on their checklist. You know what I mean? It's like it's just weird.
Definitely doesn't feel Xbox sort of studios. But what I will say, and this is me getting really annoyed again at what I saw. Gamers also have to take a bit of accountability and responsibility in the sense of how they approach things as well. Like, just because something may have had a Microsoft ownership or Microsoft deal is like, it's the shittest game ever, and so we won't get it. It's like, after we recorded, and I'm waiting for our episode to go out where we talk about Compulsion and South of Midnight, because all of a sudden for the next 2 days after that news was announced, it's the worst game ever. It's that dreaded word is a woke game. They spent millions on it. What do you expect when it's an awful game? And all of a sudden, you've got a game that was well rated, I think is a good game. All of a sudden, these people are coming out and saying, no, it's one of the worst games ever. And sorry, the other thing I would say is then, and people are saying, because we've said on here, like, Microsoft get a tough ride and PlayStation get an easy ride. Then there was things saying, look, in the last 5 years, people were saying Sony have closed 8 studios down. But we shouldn't be pointing that out either. Like, Xbox have only closed, Microsoft have only closed 5, Sony have closed 8. So that's 13 studios we're talking about that have been closed by these two companies. That's the thing that we should be as gamers jumping on, not your companies, your consoles shut more studios than mine. I just think it's depressing, that whole conversation that we're seeing around this now.
Yeah, I think they've it feels like, particularly with these two, with Sony and Microsoft, it feels like they had this insatiable appetite to chew in studio and eat studios and go, I'm going to get them all. I'm going to catch them all. And then, like we said, don't know what the fuck to do with them. And they've left them there and languished, and they bought out a great game, and maybe they haven't advertised it, or maybe they haven't put the marketing behind it, or whatever it is, and then gone, oh, well, that didn't work, let's get rid of them. And you're like, it's just a weird fucking strategy. Like, and look, like I said, you can point the finger at Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond all you like, but at the end of the day, look, as a company, they've got a duty of care to these people primarily that they've, because I think studio's a studio, right? But there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that work for these studios. And every time you let one of them go or close one of them down, those people are out of work, their families, they're struggling, they're stressed, so it's the people I feel for. I just think it's just fucking nonsense. I'm not worried whether or not I get Senua, but it does bother me that we keep doing this to these people who've built games and things that we've loved and enjoyed as part of our hobby. It's just shit.
Yeah, and the final thing I'll say on this, and at the risk of being called journalists again, which if you're new to this, check out a couple of weeks ago, we got that comment.
Broke my heart.
Don't. All I'm going to say is, again, what I'm saying about taking accountability or responsibilities, let's not play a game just because of who the main character is going to be. Because that's the other thing. And South of Midnight had a similar thing thrown at it. And, you and I have played that. We spoke last week, great lengths about it. Look, we're not saying it's game of the year necessarily material, but it's a really good game. And we've seen it, we've said in recent weeks.
It wasn't our game of the year list.
I think, no, but what I'm saying is it's not necessarily going to win the game of the year. The thing. But what I'm saying is, we've seen it recent weeks with God of War, Laufey. I can't remember, there was another game that was said. Let's not rush these studios into the exit door just because you're not necessarily happy with what the choice of main character is. It's got to be based on the game, right? And just because it's not your favourite game, all of a sudden it's the worst game ever made. That's it. That's the rhetoric, you see.
Yeah. No, I know. What I do recently is when I'm looking at games, like upcoming games, I literally sit there now, and this is really fucking depressing. You sit there and you look at them and you go, "Oh, it's great," but that developer ain't going to be around after that game. Like a prime example, Out of Words, right, which we saw last year. We saw it at Summer Games Fest last year. It's the stop motion tale where you have the two characters, girl and a boy, and they're basically it's very stop motion, like very it's set in that world, and one of them, they can't talk or communicate, but it's a what's the word I'm looking for? 2-player co-op. I look at that and I'm just like, that game's going to be brilliant, and that studio is going to shut down because they don't know what to do with it. And because, you know.
And all we're going to end up with is we're going to have COD each year. We're going to have maybe a Battlefield. We'll have FC 35,000 come out. You know,
we'll have an Assassin's Creed and a Far Cry. We'll have a, you know.
Assassin's Creed Black Flag resynced.
Yeah, resynced, remade, resynced, respecialed. Right, let's go on to a bit of happier news about games. So, this is from Polygon, although it's been everywhere. Even on, I believe it was even on Game Club Pod, right? Did a stream of this, right?
Yeah.
So this is on Polygon. So Steam game, I'll just read you the headline, made in 2 months. So it took them 2 months to make the game, to be clear, earned nearly 10 million in days. So this is the game Mecha Chameleon. And it is absolutely making a shit ton of cash for its solo developer. Good on you, buddy, by the way. So we know in the world of Steam that you can have massive, big blockbuster games that go out there, right? And then you can have games that cost, you know, a $5, cup of coffee, whatever. But it's not normal for a game to explode in the way this game is. So Mecha Chameleon is a hide and seek game where players basically paint themselves in and blend into the scenery, right? And then the opponents have got to find them. Sounds really, really simple, right? It's not, I don't think it's super aesthetic in terms of how it's been put together and played. But it launched in its launch window for a discounted price of $4.99, right? But it released on June the 9th and in less than a week sold 2 million copies, right? So that means that it's earned around $9.98 million so far. Now, we know Valve take a cut of around 30%, but that user would have taken home at least $6.9 million for a game that he took 2 months to make. That, my friend, it's great news, but it's also insane, right?
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine building something 2 months going, I'll stick it on Steam, see how it goes?
The thing is, right, when you see it, or when I first saw it, I thought that is a perfect game. I think it's one of those ones that's going to burn brightly quickly, you know, for maybe longevity, I don't know. But when you see it, I thought that's a perfect party game, or that's a perfect sort of jump on, have a bit of fun. Now, it was weird. So, yeah, as you said, the Game Club Pod, so yeah, go check them out and go sub to their Twitch channel. I messaged Joey because I saw it and I said, this game, this Mecha Chameleon, I said, I think that'd be perfect for you guys to stream, you know, because there's 3 of them. They often have Griffin as a guest. I said, that'd be perfect for you guys. And he goes, well, we're already looking at it. And I thought, well, and then last night, as we're recording, they did a stream on it. I wasn't able to watch it live, but I'll catch the rerun. I'll catch the on-demand of it.
And then it repeats.
Yeah, I'll watch the video of it. But if you look at it, it's that perfect thing of it looks really fun, it looks accessible, and it's just looks like a silly game that, you know, there's always a game that catches the public's eye, and that's the perfect one, I think,
But, you know, you said, look, it's one of those games that's going to burn brightly. I'd be happy for it to burn brightly if I earned $6.9 million out. And it took me only 2 months to make. I mean, more power to you. It's such good news. I love that. That
does show as well, you know, for all these, like, we've said it and we say it a lot on here, you know, for all the AAA games that are out there, as long as if you make a fun game or you make a good game with a great mechanic, that's all it takes. It doesn't matter if it's billions of budget.
Not in the slightest.
But yeah, fair play. And a good story. Like you said, a feel-good story.
Yes. Right. Last one from me before I hand over to you. This one's very, very quick. Pre-orders for Grand Theft Auto 6, the biggest game of this millennium, I think, so far, have gone live, or will go live. Have gone live on the 25th of June. Is that right?
Yes, they went live on the 25th.
Yeah, on the 25th. Yeah, so yeah, time warp. And you can check out their official page with all of the lovely, no new trailer, but you have got some lovely sparkly scenery of the game in images and a helicopter in the top left corner, which apparently you have to have in the cover art because that's what they've done with every single one of their video games.
When a game gets a cover art reveal, I mean, this is the day we live in, right? The age we live in.
It's mad. Yeah, you're now doing review. It was right when they started doing teaser trailers for trailers. I thought we'd gone mad then, but now we're doing launches for cover art. But yes, one thing they've stayed consistent with, every Grand Theft Auto has always had a helicopter in the top left corner of their cover art. And I saw a thing. So, of course, the current US government decided to ruin the entire thing by putting their Making America Great Again and saying they did it before GTA did. And they couldn't even get that right because their helicopter was in the top right corner. So, I mean, you know, just...
What I'm going to say on this, two things on this. Didn't the stock or the share value jump up when they released this news? I think it...
I didn't see the news on it, but I'd have thought so. Yeah,
but also
it is launching this year.
Yeah.
Shit, they're doing the pre-orders.
But you see that bloke I talked about last week was right when he was seeing all those cigarette butts outside the studio and his O2 level monitor. You see, he was right.
Yeah, he was right that the game was going to launch this year because.
No, he said that something big was going to happen, and it did. Look, we got the cover.
Oh yeah, they revealed the fucking cover. Yeah, good. Dan, GTA 6, over to you.
I've got a story, and I'm going to file this under, I don't think this is true, but there's something I want to say about it. So this is the headline that GTA 6 hype has reached such unprecedented levels, one company schedules a temporary operational pause for its release. So this is the news that in the States, I think it's a company called, just scrolling down, Burger Motorsports. If you know Burger Motorsports or you work for Burger Motorsports, let us know. There's an internal company notice that went round and it says, to all staff, customers, dealers and partners, Burger Motorsports will be observing a temporary company-wide operational pause on Thursday, November 19th, 2026. After reviewing multiple employee scheduling conflicts, management has determined that normal business operations may be impacted due to the release of Grand Theft Auto 6. Several team members have already notified management that they will be unavailable, unreachable, and or in Vice City for the duration of the day. So they're saying in a number of departments will have delays. Now, whether it's an advert for something in the game, I don't know. Whether it's just a company trying to get a bit of publicity. Like I said, I think it's a tongue firmly in cheek story, but you know there are going to be companies up and down the country where people are going to be so many people are going to be taking a day off that this I'm not going to say is going to affect like productivity or companies are going to be shut, but it probably is going to be the first game in a long time where you are going to see multiple people off work for it.
Yeah, I like how they finished it off. Normal business operations are expected to resume once employees have completed their initial exploration, finished at least one mission, and returned to reality. Yeah. The thing that kind of strikes me is that this ain't real because you don't take, if it's a Thursday, you don't take the Thursday off to play Grand Theft. You take the Thursday and the Friday and make sure you've got 4 solid days to play that. I'm assuming, as a non-GTA fan, I'm assuming you take the entire weekend off.
They have less holiday in America, don't they, than us? So
6 days.
Yeah,
6 days.
Duvet days.
Duvet, yeah.
Right, and the other story I had is talking about the will they, won't they definitely have, but they've still not said it properly, story of PlayStation and whether their games, single player games, are going to remain solely PlayStation exclusive. So we finally got, and look, we know it is, but this PlayStation CEO responded to reports recently. Now this was translated from a Japanese posting, but this is where's the statement? So the statement says, we've always determined platform selection based on the characteristics of each title. If releasing a title on PC would maximize the gaming experience, we'll continue to consider that option. Our current main policy is that for single player games developed in-house, we will further refine the value of the Our current main policy, let me do that again. We've always determined platform selection based on the characteristics of each title. If releasing a title on PC would maximize the gaming experience, we'll continue to consider that option. Our current main policy is that for single player games developed in-house, we will further refine the value of the game experience that PlayStation can offer. At the same time, we believe it is important for live service games to reach a wider audience through online multiplayer, so we continue to view releases on both PlayStation 5 and PC as a standard. Regardless of the platform, we will make decisions based on the principle of delivering the best possible game experience that maximizes each title's unique features. So, you know, kind of without saying it, but saying it, that they've confirmed it there. But it's an interesting one, isn't it? We're not going to go into it because we've said it a lot before, but, you know, there have been a couple of releases recently that haven't done well. And you're thinking, well, maybe if you did then have it on PC, it's going to expand it. But look, Sony have been around, PlayStation have been around for years. They know what they're doing, right? So it's just a shame for some of us now who just got into PC gaming.
I could genuinely hear the depression in your voice as you were reading that quote. You're just like, oh, fucking hell, I'm not getting any more games on my fucking Steam Deck, am I? That was basically why I'm even going to bother buying a Steam machine now.
I don't need a Steam machine. Yeah, it is a shame. But I think, you know, the way, it's a really well worded statement, I think, in the sense of it's about reviewing each title and what delivers the best value for them as a company. I mean, you can't argue with the statement the way it's been put forward.
What I took away from it, and maybe I'm just far too old and cynical now, is if it's a multiplayer and live service game, I'm going to stick it on as many platforms as possible because I get more money that way. But if it's just a Sony game, like a first person action adventure story game, I'm going to leave that on my platform because I earn enough and I don't really make a lot of money from the others. That's what I'm getting from it.
Well, absolutely.
And I can sell more consoles exclusively. You know what I mean? Yeah,
well, I mean, it makes sense. Look at Concord, right? That went out the window. Look at when Helldivers 2 ended up on Xbox. That had a massive surge. So I think for games like that, you absolutely need it on. And look, and I think those games, like you said, won't really be system sellers. I don't think, you know, and look, we played Helldivers 2 and we loved it, but I don't think people are going to rush out the door to buy a PlayStation for that.
No.
But your Wolverines, your Yotais, you know, your well, previously your Spider-Man, people would have done so.
Mate, at the end of the day, they're doing something right.
Well, I just got to keep coming around to yours and borrowing the PlayStation 5. I sit around, Dan, I'm coming around for a few hours. Get Wolverine out. That's not you.
I've got PlayStation for sale. I've got PlayStation for sale. Okay. Thank you, Dan. That was the news it was, which is just far too depressing, some of it. But hey, GTA 6, everyone. Okay, let us go into the thrust of the episode, which is about a console that Dan knows nothing about because he's never owned one and probably only seen one in a shop window.
Played on one a couple of times. My cousin had one, but only played one game on it. So,
okay. We are going to talk about the Palm Blistering Nintendo 64. So let's do what I always do. I'm going to talk about where we start, where this console fits in the history timeline. I'm going to talk about what led to its inception, why it was what it was. I'm going to talk a little bit about the hardware and particularly about the controller because it's quite funny. I'm going to talk about the launch of the console, some of the key titles and launch. There's not many to talk about the launch titles. I'm going to talk about where it went wrong because it did go wrong. It didn't have the impact I think that they wanted for. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about its legacy and some fun facts sprinkled on top as we go through. Sound good?
Perfect.
Good. All right. Glad you're happy. Right. So
I'm gonna do what you've done. I'm gonna take a break now. So
do it. So picture the mid 90s. This is when the Nintendo 64 launched, mid 96. So the state of the video game industry at the time, it was going through what can only be described, I think, Dan, as a paradigm shift. So you were moving away from 2D models like that the industry had thrived on for since the Magnavox. Right?
Remember that?
Since the Magnavox, we'd had 2D pixels on a screen, whether it was big pixels with football overlays or whether it was, you know, a little plumber jumping around, stomping on mushrooms, eating mushrooms, stomping on turtles. It pretty much all been 2D. With the exception of things like Mode 7 and some of the other funky stuff they did with Sonic and things like that. So just prior to N64, Sony had jumped into the game with the PlayStation. We've done an episode of that. Please go check that out because, again, lots of fun facts and interesting stories around the original PlayStation's launch. But they'd pivoted away from consoles are for kids. They're just a toy into this. It's an adult thing. They've changed the demographic. They've moved their marketing to really hit that demographic hard. We've talked before about how they used to put PlayStations into nightclubs and they really pushed for games like Wipeout and Ridge Racer and things like that. So you had this kind of Sony really jumping in and making the most of this. And Nintendo's sitting there going, well, we've done SNES and now what do we do? Because Sony have changed the game. So we need something that can compete with it. Underpinning that, you also had Sega. And Sega are really sitting there kind of going, well, what do we do? We've had our Master System, we've had our Genesis, where do we go next? And, so we're in this 32, 64-bit age now, which is where we're moving through. You've also got a media war almost going on as well, because Sony had also changed the game by saying, well, we're going to stick everything on a CD, right? Everything's going to be disc-based, cheaper to run, cheaper to create, more storage. And Nintendo, being stuck in their ways, saying, no, we're going to stick with our own proprietary silicon and our own cartridges. And that's what they did. Now, look, there are upsides to cartridges. It eliminates the load times, certainly cuts down on some of the piracy issues that other consoles have faced with CDs and Blu-rays. But they were very expensive to produce. So all this is going on. But those sort of things I'm mentioning because they also had an impact on how Nintendo were working, because we saw very quickly that, companies like Square Enix, who were creating the Final Fantasy franchise, pivoted away from Nintendo for those very reasons. So these are the key factors. Sega themselves had huge missteps, right? So they launched the Saturn in 95, so just before the N64 launched. It was a surprise launch, I think, and it very, very much surprising retailers, and there was not enough inventory to go around. Sony then launched their PlayStation and undercut it. So by $100, which was a lot in those days. It's still a lot now, in fairness. And obviously the Saturn was really complex to program for, particularly around 3D. And I think this is the bit I really want to drive home as we do this episode and go through this. Nintendo 64 is pivotal in this 3D piece. It is probably one of the reasons, if not the reason, that we all are playing the 3D games that we do in the way that we do. And you'll see as we go through this why that is. So, the industry is facing a bit of an identity crisis. As I said, for years, games have been built on 2D. The developers hadn't figured out how to control or move cameras in a 3D world. So, if you remember games in those days, you didn't have freedom of movement with your 3D camera. You didn't have any of that. You were literally stuck in a static space. Think a la Resident Evil with those kind of tank controls. So, Nintendo come along a bit late. But what they have done is they've really understood the need to move the needle on this stuff. So what they do is they're looking for the next way to build their next console. So they're in an early exploratory phase of kind of going, well, what do we do? How do we do it? So we know that they had failed partnerships with Sony and with Philips around CD-ROM technology and how we're going to move on. And that was a fascinating story in itself. But because they wanted to work out what they were going to do, they formed a strategic alliance with a company called Silicon Graphics Inc., or SGI. So this is a tech company that is famous for building high-performance graphics workstations, some massive beasts of kind of workstations, silicon workstations that power CGI-heavy Hollywood movies. Now, their founder, Jim Clark, SGI's founder, Jim Clark, originally pitched a kind of video game chipset to Tom Kalinske, who was the CEO of Sega of America, and Joe Miller, who was Sega's head of R&D. So Sega loved the prototype, but their engineering team in Japan basically said the design was too buggy, didn't really like it, and that wasn't the path they wanted to go, which was a massive misstep for them, because what actually happened was Nintendo stepped in, and out of that, something called Project Reality was born. So Project Reality was essentially the code name for the N64. So they were offered a non-exclusive licensing framework, and Hiroshi Yamauchi, who was the then president of Nintendo, basically in '93 started these conversations around what they were going to do and how they were going to do it, and they had this code name Project Reality, and they basically were targeting a $250 home console. So the sequel to the SNES out the back of this. So they worked really closely with these teams and had to shrink this hardware down because basically what they were shrinking down was these massive workstations and all the demos that they ran off of these massive workstations. They had to kind of shrink down, and obviously their ambition had to shrink with it in terms of what they could actually create. So they had to shrink down the MIPS R4000 workstation to this consumer-friendly processor and cut the manufacturing costs and everything else that went with it. But they had to cut the chip power consumption. Now, if you know anything about graphics cards, you'll know that one of the key factors driving graphics cards is the power consumption in them. In all of them, the better the card, the more power it consumes. So they had to get this card from between 1.5 and 2 watts consumption down to a 0.5 watts. So they had to reduce that by 3/4 just to bring it down to be able to run this thing. So Project Reality eventually, once they'd done all this stuff, they created an arcade or test model, which became the Ultra 64. That was kind of where it got to. And that eventually debuted as the Nintendo 64. So prototypes were sent out beforehand, but they were very expensive. So they were sent out, or you could buy one, but they normally cost between $100,000 and $250,000 for a dev kit.
Wow.
Right. But the dev kit wasn't essentially a dev kit like we know it now. Like you see pictures of a dev kit for, an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation, or, you see some of these prototypes come out in these dev kits. That's not what this was. This was essentially a kit that involved, really high powered CPUs, a Reality Engine 2 graphics board. Like this, it was way over spec for what it was, which makes you wonder why they do that in the first place, because you're kind of sending out something that isn't like, weirdly, reality.
What? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense, does it? Anyway, yeah.
So then in April 95, an elite group of Western and Japanese software developers known as the Dream Team crafted their initial 3D concept. So this is where we start getting into the realms of, what can this thing do? And started designing the 3D concepts. Remember, SGI's world primarily revolved around Hollywood movies and blockbusters. So they had nous and they had understanding of how 3D modeling would work. But mash that up with console designers who primarily only worked in 2D, they didn't really know how things worked. So you had this weird mesh of kind of these two teams coming together to try and figure it out. So it really was kind of makeshift engineering. So when they were first trying to figure out how to control games, Nintendo didn't even have a finished controller yet. So they didn't even know how that might actually work. So what they did is they got a SNES controller, Super Nintendo controller. You know what a Super Nintendo controller?
Yeah.
And they basically mashed into it a very primitive analog joystick.
Right.
And an undermounted Z trigger on the back of it. And I don't know if I can find pictures of it. If I can, I will, but I assume that's consigned to, room 101. But yeah, they basically mashed together a SNES controller and shoved an analog joystick on it so that they could control the camera for a game such as Mario 3D, because that was really the only thing they were working on at the time.
I want to know how that even happens. So are they sitting there, thinking, how we haven't got a controller yet? Has anyone got any ideas? No. And then someone's just sitting there. And it's kind of like the end of, The Usual Suspects, where someone's looking around, they see a SNES controller over there, they see an analog joystick there, and they're just looking around and thinking, I've got it. And they just literally smash it all together.
Just smash it together. I just had this vision of someone getting an analog stick and just fucking hammering it, going, it will work.
And it kind of reminds me of real tangent, but do you remember that episode of The Simpsons where Homer designs a car? And it's kind of, I'm just going
that car.
Is that the Nintendo 64 controller?
I think it's what it eventually came out as, to be honest. So So while they're building this thing, right? So mathematically, they had the kind of the perfect 3D graphics machine, right? It could do everything it needed to do, but it was often described as being wrapped in a layer of Vaseline, because the raw power of the N64, what they actually did, because they created this perfection, they'd also created a very tiny 4 kilobyte bottleneck to actually push stuff through. So game design for this thing was horrendous. Like trying to, you had all of this power to work with in terms of being able to design 3D models and create 3D models, but actually pushing this through to the CPU to get it onto the screen was just horrendous. So it was due to their architects they used. I won't go into the detail because it can be quite boring, but essentially it made it very complex and unwieldy to design for. And we'll find out what that meant during launch as well shortly. Also, as I said, Nintendo, once again, being dogmatic as they are, decided to bet on cartridges over CD-ROMs, which didn't help them. So their main reason for this was non-existent load times, which is fair, right? It's very quick. You don't have to, you're not scanning across for information. It's there. And that it could be physically durable, particularly for children, recognizing that, discs are easily broken, thrown around, scratched. And also, as I said before, anti-piracy was built in because of the custom chipset. So it's very difficult to replicate the content of the cartridge itself. Yeah, the issue with that?
Sorry, all I was going to say on that is, cartridges, I remember as a kid, cartridges were great because, they were big, they were tactile, you would just slam them in and the game would be loaded. But yeah, as you said, because I do remember my cousin had one, and it's really weird. It kind of really is stuck in my mind. And I mean, so when was this out? Did we say 96?
96, yeah.
So what would I be? I would have been around 18 or so. Remembering the price of £64, which at the time felt like that was just almost, just incredibly expensive. So yeah, it's, we talk about games now, but that's more expensive than games they're retailing for now.
Well, you'd also been paying for £1 per megabyte of storage, because that was all they were capable of, was 64 meg of storage, while CD-ROMs offered 10 times that, often between 650 and 700 megabytes. So what that meant is, and you're absolutely right, they were far more costly, astronomically so, to manufacture. So prices were often sat between 50 and 70 pounds for a cartridge, whereas it was about 40 quid for a CD, almost nearly half the price for a CD-ROM. So what storage meant, though, is quite often what they had to do is make concessions on these games. You wouldn't get full motion video. You wouldn't get extensive voice acting. You wouldn't get any high quality audio or anything like that, because, and this is why Square abandoned ship, and some other companies as well at the same time, because they just couldn't meet the lofty demands of some of the developers and what they wanted to do, quite rightly. As I said, they had the TMEM bottleneck, so this buffer that they built in, so the hardware couldn't pull the textures directly from the video RAM. So yeah, they had to manage this cache in a very awkward way. You also had a problem with resolution. So if a game used 16-bit color, the largest single texture it could fit was 64 by 32 pixels. So this is why some of those games didn't look particularly great, but also the reason why Mario looks like he does. So what developers often did to hide the fact that they had this lack of available space, they would manually tile tiny images over the surface. And this is why a lot of Nintendo and Rare games on the 64 had a very specific look about them. So they're called Gouraud shaded polygons. So they have bright, solid colors. And that's why Mario 64 looks like it does, very clean, iconic look, because that was what they had to do. And then, I don't know if you remember this, in those days, you had the N64 blur. So N64 games were often looked very blurry, whereas the PlayStation 1 games often looked very shiny. So,
it's definitely one I remember, because the main game I would have played on my cousin's one was a football one, International Star Soccer.
Okay.
I think, I could be wrong, someone correct me, I think it led into Pro Evo. But I do remember, it being quite like fuzzy screen, the graphics looking quite blocky, or almost blocky, yeah.
So the reason for that was the SGI this company, going back to the company we were talking about, they built this hardware level bilinear filtering and edge anti-aliasing, right? So directly into the chip. So to smooth out the lower res textures. But think of it now like upscaling when we do, TV, like old pictures to new pictures. The problem was on CRT TVs, which we all had at the time, the cathode ray tube TVs, everything looked really soft or hazy or blurry, which was the opposite of what PlayStation did, which didn't have any perspective or correcting texturizing or anything like that, or Z buffering. And so you got very sharp, very, a lot of warping and shimmering on them. So you had a very shiny PlayStation and a very blurry Vaseline Nintendo. So that's how it got there. That's what it looked like. But let's talk a little bit about the mutant baby in the room, which was the controller.
Yeah.
So
incredible.
This controller, it is fair to say, was designed for one purpose and one purpose only, which is, when you think about it, when you're launching a console, mind-blowingly weird. They built this controller specifically to accommodate the 3D movement of Super Mario 64. That was it. So they were building the peripheral that came with the console for one game, Dan.
And we've said so often, controllers make or break consoles. We've all got a favorite, right?
Yeah, absolutely. However, what it did do, had they not done that, it would have happened at some point, but it wouldn't have happened then. We would not be sitting here with the controllers we have, these things, with these things. We'd have got there eventually, right? Analog joysticks. Because if you remember back, that was the one that had it. I know PlayStation had one later on. They launched a second controller after the original PlayStation one that had the analog sticks. But the Nintendo 64 did it first. So
It is amazing, isn't it? Now, we've talked about our failure to launch episodes, certain consoles or whatever that just didn't work. But it is amazing how some of these failures, though, can still, and I'm not calling Nintendo 64 a failure, but what I'm saying, the things that didn't really catch fire can still bring that innovation, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, can you imagine gaming now if we were still on the old D-pad and tank
we'd all be
controllers,
playing
right?
Street Fighter.
Yeah.
That's all we'd be playing. However, whilst they did it first, I can categorically tell you they did not do it best. So, because of the way they built the analog stick, it was made of a very rigid, grooved plastic within an incredibly high tension coefficient. So any heavy use of this thing, of which there was a lot, basically would cause the internal plastic gears, so no Hall sensors, none of this funky stuff that we get now, and the gears would just grind themselves into a fine white powder. So... And we'll get on to what that meant later on.
Planned obsolescence.
Right? Yeah. So what you ended up with was very loose floppy joysticks that leaned completely to one side.
And a parent going into a room saying, "What's this white powder on you?"
Yeah, what's this white powder all over your lap? No, I've just been playing with my joystick. Honest, Mum. Right, okay.
Move on.
So, despite the bottlenecks, the weird controller design, the machine was finalized, and in the summer of 1996, Nintendo finally launched Project Reality into the masses, kicking off the global rollout of which, as we now know and love, as the Nintendo 64. But it had let's get into it. So, imagine launching a console, probably one of the most anticipated home consoles of all time at that point, because you remember you've had the NES. Then the market went crazy, all right? And we went 16-bit and we got our SNES. Then PlayStation do their thing with the PlayStation. And suddenly the Nintendo masses, and we know there are masses, hordes of them, are going, well, this thing's going to be a barnstormer, right? I can't wait for this thing to come out. It's going to be amazing, right? Imagine that. And then launching it with 2 games.
Yeah, you mentioned this to me, and we've discussed it before. Was it the Xbox One? No, the Xbox 360. Also, another console had a sort of really low launch lineup, and I think that's almost unforgivable, isn't it? That to me is Yeah, you're not setting up for success if you're only launching with 2 games, no matter how good they are.
No, totally. However, if you think that would have been a problem, you're very much mistaken, because when one of those games is Super Mario 64, you are literally not just surviving that launch, mate. You are rewriting the rules of video games overnight, right? So Nintendo launched in Japan on June 23rd, 1996, priced at 25,000 yen. Don't know what that is now in real world money. It sold out instantly. Despite the fact there were stock shortages and all, it sold out. At the Japanese launch, there were 3 games, right? There was Super Mario 64, there was Pilot Wings 64, and a board game simulator called, I can't even pronounce it, Seikyo Habu Shogi.
Sorry, and did you say, or are you going to say, were these bundled? So was it a bundle with...
No, I think these were, you had to
so
buy
the console
separately. I think it was console separately, I believe.
Okay.
In North America, they got the console, as they always do, a little bit earlier than us, in September 29th, 1996. Originally priced to sell for $250, Nintendo of America actually did a last-minute price cut. Can you imagine that on a console, Dan? Last-minute price cut. Not been out 5 years and do a last-minute price hike. For $199.99 USD. To combat the PlayStation. So they went toe-to-toe with the PlayStation with their launch price.
Look at those prices. Sorry. Look at those prices. It's mad, incredible, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
Mad. $199.
Yeah.
But as I said, only had 2 games, Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64.
Which, sorry, those 2 games cost half the price of the console.
Right? Totally. We had to wait. The UK and Europe had to wait, and Australia, in fairness. So these PAL regions, mainly because of chip shortages and some other bits and pieces that were going on at the time globally, we had to wait until March the 1st, 97. So we were almost 8 months later. So we were still dependent on the old SNES, and, especially through the 1996 holiday season, we're still sitting there playing with our Super Scope and Mario. But when it launched here, it actually launched at £249.99. So what was that? Nearly $300, and did launch with 3 titles. I remember playing all of these. So we had Mario 64, we had Pilot Wings 64, but that 8 months delay only gave us one other title, and that was LucasArts' Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Great book if you haven't read it. Game, not so much. Don't know if you ever played it.
No. And I was going to say, just on that, sort of going back to my point about being unforgivable, I guess. If you throw in the fact that, like you said, obviously Super Mario is going to be a great game, but also you are paying 60 odd quid. We've said as well before, those were the days where you would get a game and play it and play it and play it and play it. Do you know what I mean? You didn't just move on to the next one. So I guess as long as you are delivering that top quality game, in those days, you only knew how to play it, or you only knew to play on one game at a time, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you literally, I'm obsessed with that game, and I've got it. Yeah. I was with Mario 64, played endlessly for days and days and weeks and weeks. So, all right, launch is super expensive over here. However, by late 1997, due to competition from Sony, so price competition, and this is where the console war, the healthy, shall we call it, part of the console war, the good for consumer part of the console war, not talking about fanboys, but the competitiveness of pricing and, aggressive pricing, particularly against, competing console makers, is a good thing. So that's where that part comes into this, because by late 1997, those prices of £250 had collapsed down to £148.
Wow.
By Christmas, Dan, you could pick up a Nintendo 64 brand new, Christmas 97, for £100.
Wow. That's insane. That's insane.
But what was driving that price down was the fact there was a software drought. There was nothing to play on it. So you were literally living from March till Christmas with almost like, by Christmas there were 13 games. You had another 10 games available over the entire catalogue.
Yeah, but we're talking in 9 months it gets reduced to £100. So it's £150 quid. That's incredible. Mad, right? Yeah.
Not without its problems, as all these launches are. So the PAL edition, so the edition that launched in Europe, UK and Australia, the conversions were more often than not, the game conversions were often unoptimized. They ran 17% slower than the NTSC, which was the format that was used in North America and Japan. That's the in terms of on TVs. They were squished between thick black borders at the top and bottom because of the resolution jump and how badly they were coded. It wasn't until late 1997 when games like Lilac Wars, Star Fox, fixed the code and eliminated the borders. And I remember Star Fox being one of the first ones that launched with that. It did launch in South Korea and China, but to bypass trade restrictions, which we know were in existence at the time, particularly around then between Japan and those countries, the console was licensed to Hyundai in South Korea, and it was sold as the Hyundai Comboy 64. And years later, on November 17, 2003, Nintendo bypassed China's home console ban by partnering with YN to launch the iQ player. So it was basically a system-on-chip thing with a controller. So, yeah. And you could download encrypted files onto flashcards. Who says they're not ahead of us?
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, Super Mario 64 was a killer title to launch. They spent months in pre-development of that game. So Shigeru Miyamoto, who was front and center for this development, basically built a test garden. So it was a room filled with Lego-like blocks to perfect Mario's locomotion, weight, and friction before they'd even thought of how to design a level. So really just playing around with the physics of that character to make sure it moved and did everything they needed to do. To solve the problem of moving that camera in a 3D space, they came up with an independently controlled camera system. They basically... And you'll see this in other Mario games you'll have played, particularly in Mario Kart. They anthropomorphized the Lakitu news reporter, the flying cloud dude.
Oh, okay.
So flying behind Mario on a cloud.
Yeah.
So that is essentially what they did for the camera. And it taught the entire video games industry how to navigate in a 3D space, which is phenomenal when you think about it.
We've said on a number of things, even with Sonic, the innovation that these developers and creators were doing at the time. I think it's so easy to look back and say how basic systems were and how far we've come now. But I think you've got to look at the innovation and the creativity that was coming out of these people.
It was mad. And I still really fondly remember used to go, I used to ask my dad actually at the weekends if we could just go to Toys R Us in Stevenage, because in Toys R Us at Stevenage they had a demo unit of Mario 64.
Yeah.
And I just remember all I'd want to do is go in there and play Super Mario 64. This is before I got it. It was just before it even launched. So they had a demo unit. I think it was probably in, I don't know, maybe the previous Christmas or maybe in the months leading up to the March launch. They had a demo unit there, and my birthday was in March, on the 10th of March, and I actually got on for my birthday, and I just remember wanting to go there and just play Mario 64 and just standing there. It was just, it was like something else. It was mad. Yeah. It was just another world.
Yeah. But you put that with, and look, and we can laugh at the controller, but you put with how different that did look. And the console itself was nice and chunky, and I'm going to say plasticky, but I don't mean that detrimental. Yeah. But it was like, again, as a younger person, it just had that aesthetic that devices of that time had, and it just kind of iterated on it a little bit. So, it's a machine of its time, definitely.
It's definitely a machine of its time. They weren't as forward-thinking as I think someone like Sony, who clearly, with the PlayStation, really kind of wanted to go for a very different aesthetic. They, Nintendo were very, like I said before, they were very dogmatic. We're going cartridge, we're going, this kind of squat, flat, box style, grey, weirdly, dark grey console. Yeah. But yeah, of its time, I loved the N64. I love the design of it. But look, so Mario proved that 3D was the future. Well, undeniably, 3D was the future for gaming. And at that point, the floodgates opened, right? So every game you looked at from then on in was pretty much going to be a 3D style game, whatever it was. But what followed, I think, can be described not just for Nintendo, but for many companies as the golden era of software engineering, because they were now getting to grips with this stuff and learning how to use it. But Nintendo struck gold with a very small studio from Warwickshire in England that really pushed the Nintendo 64 to deliver some of the best games that you or I, or any gamers who have played on the 64, have ever played. So what were some of the key titles? So firstly, let's talk about that little studio from Warwickshire. I'm talking, of course, about Rare. Now, as we know, Microsoft owned. Microsoft happened to them.
Yeah.
But Rare originally bespoke development for Nintendo with games like Banjo-Kazooie and particularly GoldenEye 007. So we've just had a fantastic Bond game launch. It's brilliant. But actually, I think, anyone who's played that game often goes, yeah, but were there any other good Bond games? And everyone goes, well, it's GoldenEye.
Yeah. That's the only other one that's mentioned.
Yeah, right. So developed over 2.5 years by an inexperienced 10-person team, Dan, at Rare. And 8 of whom had never worked in the industry before, by the way. Directed by a chap called Martin Hollis. It was originally planned as a 2D platformer for the SNES. Then was going to be a 3D on-rail shooter inspired by Virtua Cop before it evolved into the free-roaming first-person shooter that we now know. It pioneered the console first-person shooter more so than any other game, I think. It also introduced headshots to console shooters. Okay. So one-and-done headshot.
Yeah, wow.
And the legendary split-screen multiplayer, which I played very recently, actually, was actually added as an unapproved experiment by one of the programmers just months before the game launched. So it was never supposed to be in there.
And that was 4-player, wasn't it? It was
4-player split. Yeah, but the screen was
boxes. Yeah, split into 4. Yeah,
it was split. Yeah, the screen was split.
But Rare. I'm sorry, we forget old school Rare. What a company.
I mean, just brilliant, right? I mean, some of the stuff they came out with was phenomenal. But GoldenEye in particular. So it had quite a few legal hoops to jump through, as you can imagine, with a game like Bond. Yeah. So lots of licensing restrictions. So the team couldn't use real world firearms. So they had to be creative with their naming. So they named the famously terrible submachine gun that's in there, the Klob, after Nintendo of America's then director of product development, Ken Lobb. So it's called the K-Lob. Then they named the DD4 Dostoyev pistol. So that was named after the programmer, David Doak, who you'll see in there anyway. So that's his initials in there. To make the levels feel authentic, they spent weeks studying actual film sets from 007 GoldenEye.
Okay.
And because of that, they insisted on designing fully functional, realistic environments, meaning they went out of their way to build meticulously designed public restrooms into top secret chemical facilities and military bases. Because you remember at the start, you drop into the toilets. So they had all this stuff. It's quite insane, the lengths that they went to. So GoldenEye, de facto amazing first-person shooter, like daddy of first-person shooters, really, and introduced the first headshots, which is quite phenomenal. Another masterpiece, which again is coming back around this year, is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So we're getting a remake of that game. They had to confront the chaos of 3D for the first time in Zelda. Before that, we had A Link to the Past. So you had to introduce 3D melee combat. And the director, Yoshiaki Koizumi, invented the now infamous Z targeting system. So do you remember you had a little trigger and you held down the trigger under the analog stick, and that would target the enemy.
Yes, yeah.
So that was actually inspired by traditional Japanese theatre performance, including the warrior. So you'll be familiar with the chain and sickle weapon that you've probably been using in your game, Ghost of Tsushima. So it was basically inspired by the fact that would hook onto something and anchor the camera around it. So that's where he took inspiration from. And it also dynamically formatted the screen into a letterbox when you did it. So we had Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which was another cracking game. I loved that game, and I can't wait for the remake because I am actually going to play that when it comes out. I'm going to go through games that I'm assuming you've never played. So there was also the Impossible port. So they ported over Resident Evil 2.
Okay.
So this is a game, and the reason it was called the Impossible port is because on the original discs, it actually spanned 2 PlayStation CDs because it was 1.2 gig of data.
Okay.
Because it had 15 minutes of FMV, it had the high quality audio, but Angel Studios, who are now Rockstar San Diego, actually compressed the entire game into a single 64 meg cartridge at a compression ratio of an astronomical 165 to 1.
Wow.
Using a team of 9 programmers.
It's just incredible, isn't it? That goes back to what I was saying earlier about just the in innovations that they did and the ingenuity that they had.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they wrote custom microcode to force the software to handle the video encoding. They cut the frame rate from 30 frames a second to 15 frames per second and use a special interpolation to smooth it out. They teamed up with other companies to build audio systems for it to shrink the data down. And if players used the expansion packs, did you remember the Nintendo had an expansion pack you could buy? Yeah. So the game dynamically fits its resolution between 240p and 480i on a per scene basis.
The future. That was the future.
The expansion pack was mad.
But again, it was innovation. It was pushing what we had before, right?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So the only other game I want to talk about, because again, it's relevant to other things we mentioned in today's episode. So it was a game called Body Harvest. So this was developed by a little company back then called DMA Design, who are now known as Rockstar North. So it was an open world vehicle hopping action game, and it went through a quite chaotic development cycle, 4-year dev cycle. Nintendo of Japan famously hated it because it was quite a demanding puzzle, and RPG elements had to be added to make it something that they actually enjoyed or wanted at least. And then Nintendo dropped the rights to it because it was too violent. So they didn't want to do it. But DMA salvaged the code and released it via Gremlin or Midway then. And they used, interestingly, the exact 3D sandbox physics that they built for Body Harvest to build Grand Theft Auto 3.
Look at that. Hey, what could have been?
What could have been? Just very quickly, I'm conscious of time, but just very quickly on Ocarina of Time. So Shigeru Miyamoto actually has openly admitted that the visual direction of the game was inspired by Studio Ghibli's 1997 masterpiece, Princess Mononoke. So it was in production at the same time. The team realised late in development that Link was firing his bow dynamically while riding a pony, and that's his horse. And the towering silhouette of the giant Gorgon walking behind the mountains looked exactly like scenes from the movie. Instead of changing them, Nintendo just doubled down and created deep, distinct Hyrule lore to make it stand out. So I know it looks like it. So what you can do about it? Like some really small miracles. And yes, look, I do appreciate people. There are many other games on the N64 that people will love and have loved. I haven't mentioned there are far too many for us to go over, but, just safe to say it had some amazing games. But, anything that was built within that 3D sphere with the N64 was quite often not a massive success.
I did have the top 10 games for it. I did find out.
I do too, but I would like you. No. I want you to do some work. So give us the top 10 games while we're going down.
I'm hoping they're the same. And if they're not, just don't embarrass me. Right. So I got Super Mario 64 was number 1.
No way.
Yeah. 11. Well, I had 11.91 million copies. We've got Mario Kart 64, which was next. And again, what a game. I mean, every character is getting a kart game now. But let's just remember what they did. Let's stick Mario in a kart and let's make it a party game. GoldenEye 007, which you've said, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And I've got Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
So, I thought that was a particularly new IP. I'd completely
the original
forgotten.
was the N64.
Yeah. Pokemon, we've got Pokemon Stadium there. Donkey Kong 64. Again, I think that was one actually my cousin had. I think now
made by Rare.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful 3D models in that game.
Yeah.
That was, incredible.
Yeah. Then we got Diddy Kong Racing because, of course, racing.
Couldn't be outbeaten by Mario.
Star Fox 64 and Banjo Kazooie, which again, going back to Rare. Yeah. So I mean, they pulled the stops out then, didn't they? So.
Yeah. I mean, Rare smashed that chart. I mean, and again, we've got a remake of Star Fox that's coming out imminently in a week or so.
Yeah, you're right.
So, the future is, the past is repeating itself now. It is the future.
Yeah.
So, I think some phenomenal games. And I do think there was, it was truly, as I said, this golden era of software engineering where they had to work their way around things and figure things out. And, look, Nintendo, obviously there were teams there that were pulling off the impossible, right? To make things work, such as the Resident Evil 2 and the, facing into that reality of using a cartridge format. But it wasn't helping them in the broader industry. I think it's fair to say that in trying to compete with Sony, but fundamentally in a very different way, it didn't work out for them. What they wanted to do was build something that could compete. So they originally started building something called the 64DD. There was a general manager there at Nintendo called Genyo Takeda and Shigeru Miyamoto, who we know. They wanted to solve the strict read-only nature of cartridges, and they wanted to be able to have massive pools of writable storage so players could basically alter game worlds and save custom data and do all sorts of cool things, right? So they wanted to create this thing, and it was the Nintendo 64 disk drive, the 64DD. There are pictures out of it. I will put some up of, these things actually went to prototype. So it was essentially a bottom mounted peripheral that you sat the Nintendo 64 on top of, and then you connected it via the extension port. It used 65 megabyte recordable magneto optical discs, 20 megabytes of which were entirely writable by the player. So you had control over and access to them, a bit like a hard drive today. And Takeda actually bundled in a top-mounted RAM upgrade with it, which eventually became a standalone expansion pack that we know and love today. So it was supposed to host some truly game-breaking things, such as Zelda Ura, which was actually an Ocarina of Time expansion. And I remember, vividly seeing things in magazines about you going like, what, they're going to put what's an expansion? They're going to add more to this game? And it's mind blowing, that they're even considering this. This is before the days of DLC, Dan. This is before the days of Xbox 360 arcade and, madness.
Horse armor, long before horse armor.
Right, long before, you said horse armor now. I'm going to have to put a picture in. Mother 3, Donkey Kong 64, which would have seen a game for the 64DD specific for Donkey Kong, and believe it or not, a very early version of Animal Crossing, which was in development even then. And it even included a modem cartridge for online subscription service, which I think we spoke about before, called BrandNet. Unfortunately, technical delays pushed the Japanese release all the way back to late 1999. And by then, standard cartridge size had expanded anyway. And Sony had basically locked down the market. There was no way edging in, no matter what pricey expansion you wanted to throw on it. So the 64DD bombed so hard its American release was scrapped and the games were compressed back into cartridges or moved on to the N64 sequel, the GameCube. I said earlier, because the cartridges are too small and expensive, third-party publishers walked away. Most notoriously came from the most notorious blow came from Square, who took their Final Fantasy VII project, which even now we're getting remakes on and jokes about how long it's taken to do that. Yeah. But it was originally prototyped on Nintendo hardware, but they moved it into the PlayStation and forever shifted the industry, the power in that industry by doing so. Sony also did what Sony do and framed the N64 as a kiddie console due to its lack of cinematic, mature third-party games. The market anxiety forced Rareware, not just Rare, to execute an emergency mid-generation retooling of 12 Tales Conker 64. So do you remember Conker 64?
Not 64. I remember Conker's Bad Fur Day, but I remember.
Right, so originally Conker was a very wholesome family game with a squirrel, but they had to pivot because of Sony's pressure to a raunchy, mature rated title. And it actually happened because of a single, what's described as unhinged development session. So the team at Rare were experimenting with a cute, colourful beehive level, but someone randomly decided to give one of the wasps a fully automatic machine gun. The devs at that session found the contrast so adorable that the cartoon graphics and extreme sense of violence was so utterly hilarious that they threw out 2 years of family-friendly code and pivoted the entire game towards an adult satire.
Brilliant. Yeah, just that whole... Did you say, sorry, they just gave one wasp a random machine gun? That was it. And then you get that game from that. I mean, extremes is a word that
totally
would come to mind there. Yeah.
Which is brilliant. So what you ended up with, basically creative director Chris Seaver threw out the family-friendly game and turned it into Conker's Bad Fur Day, which launched in 2001. Had lots of profanity, extreme violence, and adult humor. Yeah. It earned a strict mature rating and was actively boycotted by KB Toys, which was a retailer at the time, and completely ignored by Nintendo Power magazine. So, which is quite funny. Yeah, just talking about, we talked about Body Harvest earlier. So to try and save that publishing agreement, just one of the things they did, because Nintendo of Japan was so critical of the game, so a core group of Scottish programmers actually flew directly to Nintendo's headquarters in Kyoto and worked side by side with the Star Fox team, the actual team, for 2 solid weeks, only to get back to Scotland and discover that management had cancelled their new sci-fi game, Zenith, in their absence, and dumped the entire staff into Body Harvest just to get it out the door. So it's like, but I've been working so hard. Yeah, but we've scrapped that, and now we're just going to shove the game you've been working on for even then. The crunch. So yeah, despite that and the failure of the 64DD, Nintendo refused to go quietly, as they always do, but it carved out a legacy that stands to this day, I think. So look, Nintendo 64 wrapped up its commercial lifetime in 2002, finishing with 32.93 million hardware units and 224.97 million software units sold, which is still big numbers, right?
Yeah, 5 years in the UK then, in it. Yeah, 5 years.
Yeah. US was a primary driver for that, 20.63 million units in the US, Europe and Australia at 6.75, and Japan at 5.54, which is unusual for a Japanese console to launch and sell so poorly in Japan. Nintendo won that hardware race, as we know, sold more than 100 million PlayStations. But Nintendo's tie-in ratio was unprecedented. The Super Mario 64 sold 11.91 million copies, Mario 64 9.87. You said these numbers already, but meaning 1/3 of every N64 owner on Earth bought just those 2 games, which is mad, right? Rare's Donkey Kong 64 was a financial juggernaut that generated over $130 million. And as I said, it pioneered modern hardware standards, right? So things that we now take for granted, Nintendo implemented. So, and I'm not just talking about analog sticks, 4-player ports in the front of a console or 4-player couch multiplayer, right? That happened with Rare's GoldenEye. Rumble packs, Rumble packs, right? Packs, Rumble on joysticks. The Rumble pack was bundled in with Star Fox 64, right? So haptic feedback in your controller was built by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. So, there were many things they did. Headshots.
Nintendo does then. Nintendo
does, right? So, look, we can't talk about Nintendo without talking about one final thing, which is quite funny. The infamous, or not so infamous, famous Nintendo Party Palm injury controversy.
Yeah.
So, Hudson Soft launched Nintendo's Mario Party in 1998, and it featured mini games where you had to rapidly rotate. I'm doing this, by the way, people. Rotate the analog stick as fast as possible. So, kids basically started burning plastic sticks into their hands as a result, right? And so instead of using their thumb, they were using their palms, and it was basically burning massive proper grooves into their palms. So they had massive friction burns and plasters. A formal investigation was launched by New York Attorney General Elliot Spitzer, and Nintendo entered into a final settlement for it in April 2000, where they agreed to pay $75,000 in state fees and offer up a 4-padded fingerless protected safety glove to any household that requested them. Right? I mean, it's like the best fucking badge of honor.
Video games are violent, and they are bad for you. You see,
they are. But what was funny is you had to mail in a proof of purchase, and they would send you a bulky, non-branded, padded weightlifting glove. Is what you ended up with.
What did you have to send them? Your Nintendo 64? This one.
It says here, thousands of kids in the year 2000 were unironically sitting in their living rooms looking like teenage gym rats to play a virtual tug of war. Which I think is brilliant. So yes, look, it wasn't the most loved console in the world, but it certainly, it really did seal its place in the pantheon of great consoles, just purely because of the things it bought, the important things it bought. It gave us analog sticks, mate. It gave us Z triggers or triggers. It gave us rumble packs. It gave us headshots. It gave us 4-player co-op. look, I loved my Nintendo 64. I wish we had more time to talk about all of the things it did and all of the amazing games that were out there. You've mentioned some of them, Star Fox, you've mentioned, Banjo-Kazooie and some of the other great Rare games, but we do time out quite frequently, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities for us to come back and talk about individual games. I know you said you might have some fascinating facts you've dug up. So,
well, now you put the pressure on calling them fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, so you said a couple. So I had the lawsuit. I had the fact that Resident Evil. This one I found amazing. I looked it up again, fact checked it, but it's Japan got a Tetris game that you controlled with your heartbeat. So this was in 1998. The very first 4-player version of the beloved game Tetris 64 hit Japan, along with an included biosensor that you attached to your ear. The biosensor measured your blood pressure, and depending on which mode you chose, higher blood pressure would either speed up or slow down the falling pieces. They're saying it didn't really add much to the gameplay, and both the new Tetris and Magical Tetris Challenge, which were released in North America, were considered to be superior versions, and no other game supported the biosensor. So again, try and do something different.
Throw away peripheral.
Yeah, I had the console was originally going to be called the Ultra 64. Yeah, but it wasn't. So
I did say that, but it's fine.
Did you talk about Banjo-Kazooie, but did you talk about the stop and swap? I think you talked about the expansion pack.
I didn't.
Yeah, so this was something I always remember seeing, and I'm sure Sega at one point did, where you could insert a cartridge into another cartridge, like two Sega games. But this was Banjo-Kazooie. It had a fabled stop and swap. And like I said, I used to remember seeing it in magazines and stuff, and whether it was true or not. So it said, upon completing the game with 100 jiggies, play the game, it'll make sense. A brief scene showed an ice key and 2 large colourful Easter eggs for use in a sequel, but there was no other information about how to collect them. It took 2 years for data miners to uncover codes that actually unlocked 6 Easter eggs in the game, plus a hidden menu titled Stop and Swap. Then Rare said absolutely nothing about the feature, only offering a completely unconnected method to obtain 3 of the eggs in the sequel, Banjo-Tooie. But it wasn't then until 20 years later that a former Rare software engineer confirmed that Stop and Swap would have worked by storing information in the N64's RAM for a few seconds while you power it off, which would then allow the data to be moved into another cartridge.
Right.
So instead of just moving eggs between Banjo games, it could have unlocked bonuses in Donkey Kong 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day, GoldenEye, etc., etc. So Nintendo nixed it because they had concerns about hardware revisions that might have prevented the console from storing data in RAM as long as necessary. So again, it's just backing on what you were saying about, yes, it might not have sort of set the world alight or won the battle, but look at what they did and were trying to do. And I keep saying it, we should look back more fondly at the innovation and the creativity and the ingenuity that these people were doing then to give us these classic games. So
carrying over code to another game your favourite, right? And we won't go an episode without mentioning it, Mass Effect, right? You know, when you go to Mass Effect 2 and you've got a save on your thing, so I know what that thing is. That's essentially Stop and Swap's the precursor to that, right?
Yeah. So well, thank you, Dan, because like I said, I'd played it.
Welcome.
I'd played a couple of games on it, but literally just a football game. So if you talk to me, if someone says, what's your memories of the N64? I would say that the ISS soccer, the controller, and a cartridge being £64, weirdly. Those are the only 3 things I would think of.
It's okay, Dan.
I completely forgot Rare was like pretty much all Nintendo, so yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Good. All right. Well, look, thank you for bearing with us on this very warm and sticky evening. The things we do for the pod, Dan. Yeah. If you have enjoyed what you've heard, please don't forget to click that little subscribe button and like if you so care. It doesn't mean a lot to you. It means the world to Dan and I. We're now going to go and take a cold shower, I think, separately. I mean, maybe. I mean, it's up to Dan.
I'll go home then now.
Yeah. Dan, while we're here, anything else from you, my friend?
Thank you for listening. And if you're not already, check out the YouTube channel to see, firstly, our beautiful mugs on the screen, but also, you'll see extra bits that Dan chucks in.
Easter eggs.
Yeah, Easter eggs. There you go. As we're talking about the game. So yeah, if you're not ready, like I said, I keep saying, let me try to tease you or tempt you over to YouTube.
Good. All right. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next week for another episode of Gaming Views.